giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Happy Monday night to you. Cody Chaffins back on the beat for the first time, feels like in a long time, with Mike Griffith here. And Mike, I think you and I may got a little color last week on the DawgNation Cruise.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was a great time had by all, and I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit on the show. But man, Cody, there was a lot of news last week. I mean, Georgia kept those NFL cats busy.
Yeah, the NFL loves the Georgia Bulldogs. We found that out again. It was the last day of our cruise that the NFL draft got kicked off. We saw 3 dogs go in the first round, 13 Georgia Bulldogs go overall throughout the weekend, and it was really on Saturday when I thought we heard some of the most interesting stuff. NFL GMs kind of spilling the secret sauce on why they like Georgia Bulldogs so much. So we're going to talk about that a little bit on the show today. We'll also hit what we're looking forward to draft-wise from this 2025 Georgia Bulldogs team, how this year's team, what they need to do to have a year like this in the draft coming up next year. And like Mike said, we'll also talk a little DawgNation Cruise. But let's start off the top. We said it, 13 Georgia Bulldogs taken in the 2025 NFL Draft, 3 in the first round. And I think one of the themes this weekend, not just Philly dogs, Motown dogs.
Yeah, how about that? The Detroit Lions, they've been to the playoffs back-to-back years for the first time in 30 years, and they need to get over the hump. So why not dip into that pool of Georgia Bulldog team leaders, guys that come from a culture that the GM knows very well, a culture that has produced other championship players. Certainly the Philadelphia Eagles serve as a great example of what having a nucleus of Georgia players can do for a franchise, guys that know how to win, guys that know how to work, guys with the right mentality. And when I look at Tate Ratledge and Dom Lovett and Dan Jackson, I think, these are core guys. These are leader guys. These are good locker room guys. These are guys that'll do anything for the team. Positive attitudes, talented players. Thought the Lions did a really nice job, and I thought they got 3 really good Bulldogs, Cody, and at good places in the draft where they should have gone. So kudos to the Lions. They've had a very successful rebuild of these last few years.
Yeah, Tate Ratledge goes on Friday in the second round, and then kind of to round things out, it was a couple dogs taken late on Saturday in Dan Jackson and Dom Lovett in the 7th round. And it was after that that the GM, Brad Holmes of the Detroit Lions, stood up and answered questions. And one of the things that people asked him about, hey, yeah, you drafted 3 Georgia Bulldogs this year. What's the deal with that? And it was his answer that I thought was really, really impressive. Take a listen to Brad Holmes.
Have been to Georgia practices a lot and has been around that program a lot. And it's unlike anything else that I've seen live in terms of a college practice, in terms of just the intensity. Saban at Alabama was very similar, but just the intensity, the physicality, the detail, the tempo, the whole thing, the energy. I mean, it's so when you can go through that kind of regiment and when you practice like that, you know that they're ready. But I think everything that Coach Smart's done with that program, I think everything speaks for itself.
So in this world where people think that NIL has leveled the playing field, I think you take that on a recruiting visit, that plays really well because the money these guys are making in NIL, it's more than they've ever made in college, right? But it still pales in comparison to what you can make as an NFL player, and I think that's still got to be kept in mind.
Well, it goes with what Kirby Smart's been saying, and he said it at the start of spring drills. You remember he said, these guys need to want to be coached. The best players want to be coached, and Kirby knows that's a part of the secret sauce at Georgia, are those physical, tough practices. And yeah, they're demanding, and yeah, you can go somewhere else and it might be easier, might be less physical, but you don't come out the same way. I like to compare it, and I'm an Army guy and an airborne guy, but I like to compare it to the Marines. When people go through the Marines, there's a different level of intensity from top to bottom in the Marines. And you say, oh, this guy used to be a Marine, and what do you think immediately? Oh man, toughness, courage, bravery, a willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. When you just think about the Marines' role in our military history. And again, I mean that in a very positive way. So people that are veterans understand I'm not equating that to warfare, but the guys that served understand what I mean by that, and they'll take it as a compliment as well. I think Georgia has that mentality. This place ain't for everybody. You better know what you're signing up for when you come to Georgia. It's going to be tough. It's going to be demanding. And that sacrifice is going to lead to something much greater that's going to make the entity stronger, more powerful, more difficult to deal with, or in the case of the NFL, better prepared for what's ahead. So I think that is a part of Georgia football under Kirby Smart. I think it's a proven part of Georgia football. I think that NFL teams know what they're getting when they get a guy who's gone through Georgia, has made it through the process, that didn't take a quick NIL deal somewhere else for more money, or a starting job rather than maybe battling another year or two to start. It's almost a badge of honor, and I think it improves the draft stock. And that's why you see so many of these players that are selected in the draft. And you get to that 7th round, and most of the team needs have been met. You say, okay, now we need another guy. You know, we need a guy that we know can make the roster, that can help us on special teams, or that's willing to maybe play another position or try. And boom, Dan Jackson and Dom Lovett. What do these guys both do? They're both team guys. They both work their way up, and they're both willing to play special teams. And I think that's why you saw them drafted instead of a lot of other guys, you know, that had similar capabilities, or maybe even a little bit better. You know, listening to, you know, what the Lions general manager was saying in terms of, if the guy's pretty close, you know, you're going to go with a guy that can play special teams.
Yeah, here's a little more from Brad Holmes on Dom Lovett and Dan Jackson.
We've always had a liking for Dan Jackson, you know, in just terms of being a heady safety, and, you know, he's gotten his hands on the football, and a lot of it is above the neck, but he actually, he's faster than what a lot of people think. He's been at the Senior Bowl, so he put together a nice little year. And then Dominic Lovett, obviously, he's another one that's kind of been a fan. I've been a fan of his for a long time. We all have. And one thing about him is that, yes, he has speed. He can do a lot of stuff from the slot, but he'd be a really good special teams player. So we're fired up to get him. Just happened to fall with the Georgia win, but feel good about it.
So Dan Jackson, not invited to the NFL Combine, gets a "how you like me now" moment as he gets drafted in the NFL.
Well, that was probably just fine for the Lions, because they knew what they liked about the guy, and they didn't need to see any more. I do think that Dan popping off with that 4.4 640 at Pro Day, Cody, was probably, for a lot of people, that was the question. Well, is he fast enough? And Georgia's track, so to speak, their field turf is not as fast as the combine. So, you know, who's to say Dan might not have run a high 4.3 number or a low 4.4 number had he run at the combine, had he been invited. So I think that Pro Day number really resonated with NFL teams, certainly with the Detroit Lions.
And you heard the GM there talk about going to the Senior Bowl, and the Senior Bowl, another spot that now another Philly dog, Smile London, was down there as well. I was actually a little surprised Smile went in the 5th round. I thought he might go a little bit higher. There's a lot of upside, and he goes up to Philly where he's just going to feel like he's walking into Butts Mirror, which is just so amazing at this point. But Smile showed what he can do at the Senior Bowl, so that kind of feels like a steal to me late in the 5th round.
Yeah, the old warhorse, I call him. You know, been through a lot of battles, very consistent player, very good between the tackles, very good in coverage as well. Cody, you got to think the foot injury was why he dropped. It's kind of like, remember, they had some concerns about Nakobe Dean's health, and that's why he went in the 3rd round. And I think Philly saw an opportunity and said, you know what, this is a guy that's going to make it through his first contract. Well, and hopefully that foot holds up for Smile. It certainly did at the second half of last year and into the Senior Bowl and the NFL draft process. But Smile's a great football player. He's got a high football IQ. He's a great fit for that environment. I think it's only going to enhance what Philadelphia's been able to do on defense.
Yeah, you're going to have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis playing in front of you, Nakobe Dean next to you, potentially out there. So really important for Smile. Now, we were on the ship, Utopia the Seas, doing our DawgNation Cruise for the 1st round, and there was no bigger reaction. That room went wild when Jalen Walker gets drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. That long drought, you know, Falcons have been around since 1966, had never taken a Georgia Bulldogs in the first 2 rounds. That is over now. Again, I wasn't sure that Jalen Walker would be there when the Falcons picked at 15, but when he was there, it just seemed like a no-brainer.
Well, maybe now they got a mobile quarterback with Penix. Maybe they need to sign Stetson Bennett through free agency and really put the state over the top, right? But to your point, I really like what they're getting in Jalen. You know, Jalen Walker is more than just what he is on the field. He's more than just that player that's going to be assignment sound, that's going to make those plays coming off the edge, stopping the run. This is another locker room guy. This is a leader. This is what you call a catalyst. And every great program has a catalyst, that guy that, like the Alka-Seltzer tab, when you drop it in the water, it just everything starts to fizz around him. And that's Jalen Walker. This is a guy that gets his teammates excited, that keeps everybody up, that pulls everyone together. And so his value goes well beyond just what he can do on the field. It translates into the locker room, the offseason workouts, the attitude towards the coaching staff. Other players feed off the coach's son, Jalen Walker. So a great pick for Atlanta, not just because he's from Georgia, but just because he was very worthy of that draft spot. I was actually a little surprised, Cody, that he didn't go in the top 10. I know a lot of mocks had him going to Carolina. Surprised the Panthers passed on him.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. And not that people come here on the beat every Monday night to hear Falcons talk, but Falcons this offseason lost a guy like Grady Jarrett, who really was that captain in the locker room. And that's what Jalen Walker reminds me a lot of, is the guy, you know what, we just lost, and it was terrible, and we're going to stand in the locker room, and here come the reporters. They're going to come to me, and I'm going to face the music every week. And Jalen Walker seems like the kind of guy who can do something like that. Now, hopefully the Falcons win more than they lose, but they're going to be those moments, right, in the NFL. And he can be the guy to stand up and say, this team stands for this.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's not, he's not the only one. I mean, the thing about Georgia football and the kind of players that Kirby Smart puts out is they talk about being a player-led team. And while not everyone's as vocal, or maybe not everyone is charismatic, everyone has a way of understanding the charge. You don't win games like they did against Georgia Tech and come from behind, or like Ohio State a couple of years ago when they're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. You don't do that without high character guys that are able to lock in and become mission oriented very quickly. There's not a lot of that me and I stuff at Georgia. You just, again, not for everybody. Some guys want those numbers. Who was the extremely talented defensive end a few years ago that transferred to Florida State? He became the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Fantastic player. He wanted those numbers. He wanted that status. He probably never would have been the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He goes to FSU and he gets that. And I don't know why his name's slipping in my mind. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, Jermaine Johnson.
Jermaine Johnson, great kid, great person, had nothing but great things to say about the Georgia Bulldogs after transferring. But he knew he wanted those individual accolades, and he wasn't going to be able to get him playing in Georgia's system. So that worked for him. The guys that stick around, you have to understand, that may not come. Trayvon Walker is a great example. He wasn't even first team All-SEC. But what you do notice is that the NFL scouts and GMs see through the accolades and see the player and understand the charge. So you can build value for yourself without putting up double-digit sack numbers, without being your conference player of the year or your first team guy. That's where you got the whole no-name defense thing for Georgia. Was those guys weren't first team. You go back and look. It was Alabama this and Alabama that, and yet there was this legendary defense that I think had one guy make preseason All-SEC. Might have been JR. So the fact of the matter is this is another advertisement for how Kirby Smart coaches and develops. We know he wins games, and we understand that. And we know that he develops talent, but he also produces NFL players, and the numbers are staggering at this point.
Yeah, you talk about 13 this year, 8 last year, 10 the year before that, and then, of course, the record-breaking 15 back in 2022.
And think about this, Cody. I mean, if Carson Beck doesn't get injured, he's drafted. You're up to 14 players now, and we could probably cherry pick and find 1 or 2 guys that transferred out that got picked. I mean, I saw Jamon Dumas-Johnson didn't get drafted. I believe if he stays at Georgia, he probably does. Yeah. He would have been a draft pick. So, and he's not the only one. There's a couple other guys floating around out there. If not for the portal, Georgia's numbers would really be ridiculous.
All right, here's my transition. You ready for this? So you talk about Jermaine Johnson, who wears number 11 for the New York Jets. How about the former Dawg wearing 11, who is now a New York Jet, right? You following me here? Arian Smith gets picked by the Jets. And we talk about some surprises. That one did surprise me a little bit that he went that high. Now, we know the speed for Arian. We heard about Dan Jackson talking about the Senior Bowl and what he did there and how he improved his stock. Arian seems to be one of those guys as well. But Arian going to the Jets in the 4th round, good for him.
Yeah, it did surprise and didn't surprise. We know he has world-class speed. And Mike Bobo told us, hey, with a guy like that, just sending him deep is enough. Even if you don't throw it to him, you're sending someone deep. You're making that defense get vertical. You're stretching him out. Do you dare single cover him? Because if he's behind you, it's over. I mean, this is a guy with world-class speed. And And the Jets are confident that they can work on his, ability to catch the ball more consistently. They used Jameson Williams as an example of Aaron Glenn and who he's worked with in the past as an elite speed guy that had to work on that. I think, we talk about the Senior Bowl, and sometimes it gets lost in translation because some people don't continue to follow football after the season, right? You go down to the Senior Bowl, though, and these players have an opportunity. And yeah, the drill work's important, the one-on-one work, the height, weight, weigh-in. But the coaching staffs have an opportunity to spend time around the players and really get a sense of who they are. It's almost like on-the-job training. What's this guy like in the huddle? How fast does he pick things up? How does he respond to hard coaching? How does he respond to adversity? When we bring up the drops, how does he react? It's more face time. And the more you get to know Arian Smith, the more you appreciate his attitude. I mean, this is a guy that says, hey, I had some drop passes, man. I should have, but I made some good catches too. And I can't beat myself up and I can't get down on myself. Yeah, I know I got to work on this, but I still believe in myself and I know I can get better. And then for those of us that have followed his journey from the time he came, I mean, my goodness, early on, it was one injury after another as Arian tried to stay sharp for track and keep those quick twitch muscles on edge. Well, when you do that, that doesn't always lead to durability. And so he had to basically give up track to build more of a football body and get more durable, where the NFL now is confident that, yes, this is a guy that can stay healthy. He stayed healthy through last year. That was hard to do. It was a long physical season, especially when you consider he also played special teams. But yes, he can play physical. Yes, Arian Smith, they use the word tough. Nobody would have said that when he was a freshman or a sophomore. But he came out of Georgia. Like I said, he's got that Marine mentality. Bring it on. I know I need to get better. I can be physical. I can be tough. I can beat press coverage. I can go down there and hit somebody as a gunner on special teams. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And I think, I don't know if it's a steal yet, but I think it's a good pick in the 4th round because of the upside that Arian brings and the way his presence changes defenses, whether you throw it to him or not.
Yeah, let's hear the Jets brass. They talked about the drops for Arian Smith and how they think he can remedy that.
We can help him to improve those drops, but that is an element of his game. But the elite speed is a hard trait, to pass on. And you see at the end of yesterday, you kind of see these things go on runs, right? At the end of yesterday, I think Minnesota took the kid from Maryland, felt in a speed piece, and then we opened the day with like 3 speed players going in a row. You get a run on these speed guys because everyone's looking for speed in this league to add that element.
And I would say, just to elaborate on that, the one thing that this player is, he's very self-aware, and I think it starts there. And he knows he has to get better at that. And I've lived through this with Jameson Williams. Like the first thing, when he came into the league, everybody talked about his drops, and he worked on it like tirelessly every day in practice. And I see this player doing the same thing. So if you're self-aware and you understand that you have an issue and you know you can get better, all right, that's the start. So I know this player is going to get better at that.
And he had a good week at the Senior Bowl as well. So he's impressed. Good Senior Bowl, good pro day. We saw a lot of good things on film. So really excited about Arian.
Yeah, I go back to Kaylee Mansell the first day y'all are down at the Senior Bowl. I say, y'all talk to Arian? She said, no, he was still catching more passes. He missed the media session. That tells you, and that he did all he needed to do right there, right? That showed the GMs he's working on it.
Well, he did come around. We were able to get him, and to your point, yeah, Kaylee was able to get a hold of darn near everybody there. I mean, she was really on the spot. And again, this is, one of those cool DawgNation things where we go down there every year and we get all this access to these players and we learn so much more about them, just like we do at the NFL Combine when Kaylee and I go there and she's taping all the players and I'm interviewing all the players and we're pulling them aside. You get so much more insight. So and that's just the media. Just imagine what the NFL teams are learning about these guys, because they do come and visit Georgia practices, but the access isn't the same. And a lot of times it's not the GM and the head coach. It's the scout. So the scout comes back with his notes sketched down and, okay, this is a guy we may want to talk to. And then when the GM and the head coach, and you heard Aaron Glenn there, when they get that face-to-face, that galvanizes, that changes things. It's one thing to hear about a guy having a good attitude. It's another thing to actually interview him and get a sense of who he is and what he is. And that's why the Senior Bowl is so important to the draft process. That's why the Combine is such a critical factor. Yeah, the film is there. Yeah, 80% of the hay's in the barn. And yeah, teams have a pretty good idea who they're looking at. But when push comes to shove on draft day, and you're sitting there in the 4th round, and there's Arian Smith and 10, 15, 20 other receivers that were every bit as productive, and you're trying to decide between them, which one is it going to be? This guy runs better routes. This guy's got better hands. This guy had bigger numbers. Yeah, but this Arian Smith kid, he's tough. We talked to him. He plays special teams. Even if, maybe he doesn't get in there, maybe he's the fifth receiver, but we know we're going to use him on special teams. He's willing to do that. We're going to take a chance. We're going to work with him. We're going to make those hands better. We believe in this kid. We looked him in the eye and we saw that he was legit. Not every NFL player is pretty well documented. A lot of guys lost a lot of draft stock because their interviews were bad. Georgia guys, it's just the other way around. Their interviews are good and they gain value when these GMs and coaches get a sense of who they really are.
Yeah, and one thing we did hear over and over, it's one of those things that Kirby Smart harps on. I want my best players on special teams. And he not only does that because it gives Georgia an advantage, right? And you want to have that, but it also makes these guys so much more, useful in the NFL. Like you said, when you do have a guy who's maybe borderline, is he going to make a roster or not? The attitude is Brad Holmes, the Detroit Lions GM, talked about. I want a guy with the attitude. I want to go out on special teams. A lot of these guys have been the best player on their team, and the divas don't want to go run down and tackle somebody. You got to have that attitude.
A great example for you, Cody. DawgNation hired this guy. We knew he was good on air. We knew he had the personality. We didn't know he'd carry the camera like that. We didn't know he'd be the team player. We didn't know he could stand in front of a room and roast teammates and SEC coaches. I mean, you want to talk about a dynamite draft pick. How about Cody Chaffins to DawgNation, right? What an addition to the clubhouse. I think it put us over the top. Let's go win a Super Bowl, man.
I appreciate him. Mama trained me right, I guess. My mama's my Kirby Smart.
No doubt about it.
We'll move quickly through some of there's 13 guys. We're not going to hit all of them, but some of the other ones that maybe are out there. Right decision to go, and we kind of questioned Trevor Etienne. Was it the right decision? Goes as the 9th overall running back to go off the board, but does get taken in the 4th round by Carolina.
Yeah, not bad. And let's be real about this. Running backs' values have been debated. It's really the second contract, okay? So I know some people already know this, so if this sounds a bit repetitive, forgive me. Some people may not know this. All the NFL rookie contracts are pre-slotted, and they're done in a way because of Matt Stafford, because Matt came out back in 08, 09 and landed this, whale of a contract, and a lot of the veterans were like, hey, this guy ain't done anything, and he's making all. So they said, you know what? The union got together and said, yeah, we got to do this. Let's get this salary scale for rookies, and this is what it's going to be. So the point I'm getting at, though, is it's the second contract. The rookie deal is pre-slotted basically based on where you're drafted, and Connor Riley has a story with all those salaries. But you can look up what they're going to make before they even get picked. This is what the guy picked 16th in the 1st round. This is what the guy in the 3rd round and the 3rd pick is going to make. So it's the second deal that matters. The most important thing in many cases, and I think in Trevor Etienne's case certainly, is going to the right team, going to the right fit, so that you can be productive enough to get that mother of a second contract where the money really escalates. So part of the reason Etienne went was because he'd already played 3 years of college ball. And he knows, because his brother Travis is in the league, that the money's with the second contract. So he saves himself a year of mileage. What else did he have to prove? Let's face it, he was fantastic against Texas. 5 touchdowns in 2 games. We saw it all. We saw the ability to catch the ball. We saw the pass protection. We saw the leadership. We saw the burst. We saw the vision. We saw the cutback. We saw a guy that played with a bad shoulder against Kentucky and carried his team to win when they really need him. We saw a guy overcome cracked ribs and come back and help his team win an SEC. He proved everything he needed to prove. Selfishly, we all want Trevor Etienne back because he's a heck of a player and Georgia's trying to win another title. But personally, I think he did do the right thing in hindsight. Being picked among the top 10 backs, top 10 was kind of my cutoff, and I think he's going to a really good team. I think the Panthers are going to continue to improve as they build around Bryce Young. I think a lot of Bryce Young. I think he's a fantastic quarterback that was a little bit overloaded as a rookie. But I think with a guy like Bryce Young, just play it out in your mind. When Bryce Young goes back to pass and those primary guys are covered and Bryce buys a little bit more time, and then whoop, who does he drop it off to? Etienne in the open field. So, I mean, it's a good fit for Trevor. I'm glad that he went there. I'm happy for him and his family. If Georgia doesn't get Trevor Etienne, I'm not sure they beat Kentucky, and I don't believe they win an SEC championship. To me, one of the most successful portal stories of Kirby's career was Trevor Etienne coming in, providing a lift against Texas and helping him get by Kentucky in an early, tough road game.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he comes back another year. Does he improve a round? Is that really worth it if you do that? All right, another guy who had a decision to make, who you guys talked to at the Senior Bowl, Ty Ingram Dawkins, goes as the first pick in the 5th round. Could have come back to Georgia. Sounded like he was kind of done with Georgia. He mentally wasn't there anymore, but does get drafted, gets taken in the 5th round.
You know, he played a lot of snaps last year. And, you know, I think he's a steal. I think the Vikings got a steal. I think this guy has 3rd-round talent, just hasn't done it yet. Had to grow and learn a lot at Georgia. He came out of South Carolina as the #1 player, but he needed to mature. And he had to play behind some big dogs. And it's hard to get better and mature when you're not playing. Carson Beck, case in point. The fact that Ingram Dawkins is just now starting to blossom. I mean, I love this pick for the Vikings. I mean, this is a guy with a high football IQ. He's got a great attitude. And to your point, it was just time. You know, he'd weathered the storm. He'd done the Marine drills. He wasn't going to re-enlist. It was a tough 3 years. And he got himself prepared. He got himself to the Senior Bowl. You know, that was kind of the first aha moment when he got invited to the Senior Bowl and Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse did. And he said, aha. Well, what do we have here? Well, the NFL is like looking clearly through their magnifying glass and saying, this guy has got a lot of untapped potential. This guy's healthy. This guy's athletic. I believe he was the 2nd fastest defensive lineman at the Combine. So I think an absolute steal for the Minnesota Vikings to get Ty Ingram Dawkins in the 5th round.
Jared Wilson also, you know, he only played 1 year at Georgia. Would he go in the draft? He does. He gets taken in the 3rd round, so you can't blame Jared Wilson for that. Seemed like he made the right choice there. But now I think about it, and so you look at where everybody goes. Tate Ratledge goes 2nd round, Dylan Fairchild 3rd round, Jared Wilson 3rd round. So you had 3 top 3 round NFL guys on the offensive line. You had 13 guys drafted overall. Kind of begs the question from me, did Georgia underachieve with all of this talent? Well,
You know, Cody, if they'd been healthy all year, I'd say yes. But the fact of the matter is, every Georgia offensive lineman missed at least 1 week of practice. You know, Tate Ratledge was out, what, 4 or 5 weeks, you know, with the tightrope surgery. Say, well, they had a 2nd rounder. Well, they really only had him half the year, if you're going to be honest. And when he came back, was he really 100? I don't think he, in fact, I know he wasn't. That's why he didn't play in the Senior Bowl. So, yeah, he's a 2nd round talent, but you didn't get 2nd round production because of the injuries. You know, Dylan Fairchild had a nagging injury. Jared Wilson, I believe he missed a game as well. So had these guys all been healthy, you could certainly point to it and go, oh, yeah, well, they should have done a lot. Well, they didn't stay healthy. And if you think back to 2021 Dawgs and 2022 Dawgs, those teams stayed pretty healthy. That's part of the equation. I mean, the Georgia that we saw play Notre Dame was not the same Georgia that we saw play, I don't know, pick your early impressive game, Clemson.
Right.
It wasn't the Clemson, Georgia. It wasn't the same team. The team wasn't intact. I mean, remember Michael Williams got hurt in the Clemson game, and he was out. When he came back, he flashed against Texas. Another guy that played most of the year, 70%. We mentioned Etienne. He missed a good spell, missed 4 or 5 games as well. You know, I don't think he played against, was it Ole Miss that he missed or Alabama? I think one of those two, or maybe a little bit of both. But the fact of the matter is, it's easy to step back in hindsight and say, wow, look at all that talent. But then you got to look who was actually there on game day. And when the offensive line comes up, the quote unquote underachievement, remember that continuity is so important. And when you're plugging and pulling guys around and moving, you never really hit that continuity. You never really hit your stride where you had that congruence in the left hand knowing what the right hand was doing. There was this guy in, there was this guy out, this guy moved positions, we're going to swap this over here. So there was a lot of changes going on. And then on top of it, you know, you had a situation with the drop passes. And, you know, not to pick on, you know, the receivers again, but if those passes are caught, maybe Georgia's not playing from 2 touchdowns behind. Now all of a sudden you got a little more run pass ratio. Now your offensive line can tee off on some guys instead of being in pass pro 2/3 of the game because you're trying to catch up and the defense knows you're throwing the ball. So there was a lot of circumstances that went well beyond just evaluating the offensive line. And that's that complementary football that Kirby talks about, right? We can reflect on 2021 and go, oh man, Stetson Bennett was great in the 4th quarter. Yeah, well, if you were down by 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns because your defense was not doing as well or receivers were dropping passes, Stetson may not have been in position for those heroics, right? So it's kind of, you have to evaluate on a case-by-case, game-by-game basis, and that's what these NFL coaches and scouts are able to do so effectively.
And the one thing you bring up over and over on the show, underachieved. They still won the Southeastern Conference. They still
what a bad season.
went to the college football playoff and beat Texas twice.
Texas twice. Yeah.
So
got to keep reminding everybody, because this Texas thing doesn't go away. I mean, my gosh, I thought Quinn Ewers might go in the first round. He went one pick behind Dan Jackson.
Oof,
Wait a minute, that Quinn Ewers, the guy with all the big TV ads and NIL money and SEC media and Quinn Ewers highlights on, and he's a 7th round draft pick. Okay, so you know what I'm saying? There's a little bit of sell there. There's a little bit of hype. That's part of the appeal of Texas. They're very good at hyping things up. You know, I heard they were back, but then Georgia decided they weren't. So here we are.
And when some of those Texas offensive linemen, I said, I know some guys that can whip them. All right.
Didn't Michael Williams get 2 sacks on that first round pick, right? Can we mention Michael quickly?
Sure.
I want to say this because the players are, you know, they're very busy guys, and we don't always get a lot of time with these guys. But when you cover them over the course of their careers, you kind of get a little extra look, or you might pull a guy aside. And I know you've done it. I've done it. You know, sometimes the interviews are done and I'll just, you know, tap the guy on the shoulder, say, hey, man, you played a hell of a game. You know, just a compliment or just a moment, or Dan Jackson, hey, get ready for the oil painting, Dan, because the people are going to have that play against Georgia Tech. Just that little bit extra. And I was able to connect with Michael a little bit. And this is kind of, I saw he came up as like a suggested friend on Facebook. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Like Michael Williams is going to take a minute for a sports writer when he's on the verge of a $20 million contract, and sent me a nice note. I said, these guys are there's real people under those helmets, under those numbers. There are real people who do pay attention, who do care, and who do appreciate the media and certainly the fans. I mean, you can't get these guys to stop talking about the Georgia fans when we get them one-on-one, and we don't always write it because people go, oh, well, you know, they like the fans. How does that help his draft stock or whatever? But they do to a man, and that's why you see so many of these guys coming back being recognized. You know, part of it's that Georgia likes to get him back so they can, you know, wave to the crowd and get the ring or whatever. But you go to a lot of these places, Cody, and you know this, you've been doing this a long time. They don't have those guys coming back. They ain't coming back. Georgia, these guys are coming back to see Kirby and to pass their wisdom on to these younger players and say, hey, man, stick with it. Trust me. It's a grind. It's rough. Kirby's going to get up your tail, but do it, because these NFL teams are taking note.
Yeah, and that's why we can be excited for these guys. Malachi, I've interviewed his family multiple times, and you just get chills when good things happen.
Longest hug for the NFL commissioner ever. You wonder how Malachi Starks can, because I'm thinking, okay, this is a guy who charms you. I literally had a scout tell me one time, I don't know, I think he might be overrated. He went and talked to Malachi. He came back 2 hours later and said, man, what a great kid. I just got all these. Malachi will charm you. And I'm thinking, all right, now how's he going to do this? The pink suit, I'm like, okay, this suit. All right, Malachi, we got you. You're there, you're standing. But then the embrace, I'm like, oh, I don't know what he's telling the commissioner right now, but the commissioner is going to get done with that Malachi Starks embrace and go, wow. I really hope this guy makes it. What a great. Hey, do we have any more of those spots for rookies on the NFL endorsement deals? Because let's get Malachi. I'm telling you, that's a guy, when you talk about charisma and you talk about locker room and you talk about a guy that keeps a team together, that everyone loves to be around. This stuff matters, Cody. You know that. That's what you do.
Gotta have the glue. So really love Malachi there. All right, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at next year's draft and kind of talk about some of the guys who could be there. Who are going to be Georgia's first rounders in 2026? Very interesting questions and stuff to dive into. We'll do it all after the break. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
All right, we're back on the beat. Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith. Appreciate Ingles being a part of it. We got a special surprise coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll get to that when we get there. But before that, let's talk about the next year's draft in the NFL. I went through, and there's folks putting out these way too early mock drafts for 2026. And so I'm one of these people who clicks on those kind of things. Went through about 4 or 5 of them, and we'll just kind of go through what people think. And I think when I see people out there kind of filling these out, I think they say, okay, we got to have Georgia guys on there. So I don't know that they necessarily know which Georgia guys it's supposed to be, but I think they say, well, it's Georgia. They're going to have guys go in the first round. I got to figure out who that's going to be. So that's why none of these mock drafts I went through had overlapping names, which is just mind-blowing, right? Like last year it was pretty consistent. Carson Beck, Mykel Williams, Malachi Starks, and we didn't see a lot of Jalen Walker love this time last year, but those names were out there, and those guys, 2 of the 3 got picked in the first round, but not a lot of overlap this year. So we'll start here. CBS, in their way too early 2026 mock draft, has Dalen Everett going number 24 to the Packers and Christian Miller number 31 to the Ravens. 2 defensive dogs taken there. How do you feel about Dalen Everett? He's been a guy who's played so much football. I mean, he started as a freshman. Kirby's been on him. He's one of those guys like we've shown on our boots on the ground. Kirby likes to get on him, but he has definitely developed into a heck of a cornerback. Could you see him going first round next season?
Yeah, and then he can send, Kamari Lassiter a thank you note because that's what people see. You see a guy that developed like Kamari and, Dalen Everett, especially towards the end of last year, really turned it on. That was a guy who had a decision to make. He could have been drafted this year probably in the first 3 rounds. So, I think he's banking on, first round and that quite literally and figuratively. I mean, this is a guy who's gotten better and better and better. You think about the amount of experience that he's going to have under his belt. You think about the opportunity to grow more physical, a little bit bigger, stronger, faster. And then because it happens every year. But I really like Dalen Everett in this spot. Turn on the Quinn Ewers highlights or lowlights, however you want to put it. And there's number 6 picking him off. So I like that. I mean, this is going to be a cagey veteran guy, a physical guy that's going to be part of a very good Georgia defense. That washes for me. I would buy Dalen Everett as a first-round pick next year.
It's going to be interesting next year. It'll be kind of like Kamari Lassiter, where he's going to be on a side that's probably not going to be tested a whole lot. They're going to be going after that other cornerback. You're expecting a first-year starter. If Daniel Harris started, I guess, a little bit at the end of last season, but there's probably a lot more action going to go to the other way, and Dalen will be your lockdown guy. Christian Miller, talk about decisions. He's one who maybe could have been drafted this past weekend, but decides to come back to Georgia. He's coming back because he wants this CBS guy to be right, and he'll be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, and yes, another guy that definitely would have gone in the first 4 rounds, but, can put a complete season together, a healthy season together that can be at the forefront. He'll get those preseason accolades. There'll be plenty of attention on him. He'll have an opportunity to prove himself, and he'll be playing next to Xavier McLeod, another guy that I think could pop. Now, he's a third-year sophomore. He'll be eligible for the draft. You start looking at these guys in their uniforms and, so to speak, I mean, these guys look good in their uniforms and they just haven't had the opportunity or the health to prove it. And if Christian and Xavier or Xavier are working side by side in the offseason, they're pushing each other and, they get a Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, vibe going, there's no telling how good this football team can be if that interior defensive line gets back to that prolific status we saw in 21 and 22. So I like Christian Miller enough to think he could be. I'm putting McLeod there too. I know he's got a lot longer, road to hoe. He's got a lot more to learn. He needs that experience. But when you take a look at physicality, and Cody, you've been out there shooting those practices, 94 looks good in a uniform. So they got a couple of prolific size guys, athletic guys, Georgia guys that have been through the system. If they have big seasons, there's no doubt these 2 guys can pop. And there's other guys like that. And I know you mentioned a couple of them. I know C.J. Allen's on a draft board, but Raylan Wilson is an athletic freak. I mean, just like you mentioned a second ago, Jalen Walker wasn't at the top of everyone's list or as a first-round pick, but he has that special season. And all of a sudden, everybody goes, wow. And then you say, oh, he is physical. He does have the football IQ. I think the same thing about Allen and Raylan Wilson. They're one great season away from being potential first-round picks. Same goes for Daniel Harris. I mean, I know it wasn't too long ago we were questioning, but the guy's gotten better and better and better. And you want to talk about prolific size and speed and now coachability. This is another guy that could pop for you as a first-rounder.
Yeah, well, DraftWire had C.J. Allen going 17 to the Broncos. So, again, not an overlap there. But it is one, I think somebody sitting there typing says, there's going to be a Georgia linebacker taken, right? And it may be C.J. Allen, but I think it could be Raylan Wilson as well. And like you said, if you're looking guys to pop, those guys have now going into their 3rd season as starters. I've seen a lot of football. The IQ stuff is there. They're going to do great in all those meetings with Senior Bowl people and at the Combine as well. But, yeah, if they can come out there and have a great year, this could be the year some of those guys pop. One of the other ones we saw, Newsweek, had Zachariah Branch. The only dog in the first round was Zachariah Branch, number 32 to Philly. Now, the team and the timing is late first round. That doesn't really matter. But it was interesting to me to hear Zachariah Branch because I think it could be one of 3 Georgia receivers. It could be first rounders, depending on who has the better year, because all those guys have talent.
Yeah, Noah Thomas and Colby Young, obviously these are big targets. These are guys that can run. Other guys that are maybe one great year away. First round's tough, though. First round to me for a receiver, George Pickens didn't go in the first round, and George ran a good number. Now, granted, he had a few more injuries, but you were talking about a very special talent. First, maybe second day guys, second, third round. I think all 3 of these guys are capable of that. I think that's a little too optimistic. And I think part of the reason for that is I don't know how much Georgia is going to rely on the pass. And you don't want it to be a lot because that, they're behind all the time and that run pass, ratio will go out the window. You want to have the balance, right? And that's why, Georgia's gone, however many years without a 1,000-yard receiver. Okay. Well, it's not that they haven't had guys that are capable of it. It's that they want balance and that they want depth and that these receivers do more than just catch passes. They play special teams and you have to manage snap counts. And, NFL teams see the value in that for sure. But I think it makes it a little bit harder to get that elite guy that all he does is catch touchdowns. That's not going to happen at Georgia. These guys are going to do more because that's what it takes to be a part of this program.
Yeah, it's going to be spread around too thin. It was interesting going back. Again, I get obsessed with this stuff. So I go back to last year's way too early and see, like we talked about, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks were in there. All of us thought Carson Beck will be a first rounder next year, no doubt. It's interesting. He did not show up even on next year's. A lot of the quarterbacks, Drew Aller, some of those guys coming back next year are getting love, but Carson not getting a lot of love, at least at this moment. But looking at last year's, I did see, it was interesting, Ernest Green was projected maybe this year as being a potential first rounder. And so that got me thinking, Ernest is another guy who could work his way. Now, a lot of folks project him to play guard on the next level, although he plays tackle at Georgia because he's just not as big. But a guy that is big, Monroe Freeling, 6'7", 315. So that is there, right? His physical ability. If he can put better tape together this year, I think he's another guy who could, be pushing that first round if he can have a good season because the physical traits are there.
Yeah, and that's where the Georgia run game matters. Like I said, you want to put the defense in a run-pass conflict, and if you're constantly looking at 2nd and 8 and 3rd and 10, you're really putting your tackles, in a bad position. Defenses are going to load up. They're going to run zone blitzes. They're going to run twists, stunts, whatever, and it doesn't look as good on film. But when you've got that balance on offense, that really plays to the advantage of the lineman when that defensive lineman doesn't know if you're going to fire out and punch him in the mouth or take a step back and get into pass pro. I like Ernest Green a lot. This is a guy who was coached up really well at Bosco out there in California. He came in with a great skill set in pass protection. He needed to get a little bit more physical. His development has been somewhat slowed by injuries to this point. You hope that he's got all that fixed. If he does, he's prolific and he does have first-round talent, but he needs first-round health. And that's what this offseason is going to be so important for him, as well as Monroe Freeling. So both of these guys can play football. It's not like Georgia's threw a couple guys out there that couldn't play and said, sick them. But they were injured or they were inexperienced or they were in difficult situations. And by the way, the quarterback can help out if he gets rid of the ball a little bit quicker. Gunnar Stockton's release point and release quickness is going to be an issue in terms of his ability to improve. So there's a lot of things, once again, that kind of go together here. It's never just one thing. It's a cascade of events or a cascade of circumstances that lead to what we see. And so the naked eye, it can lie to you a little bit. You got to look a little bit deeper and consider the circumstance and, the other players that are playing around him.
Some of the other guys we should mention who we're going to be talking about this time next year, Oscar Delp, maybe Lawson Lucky go as NFL draft picks. But I do kind of want to talk about, you bring up the quarterback. And to me, I'm trying to come up with a scenario where Gunnar Stockton gets drafted next year, and not necessarily because he's not going to have a good year, but I think if he has a good year, I don't know that he's still, physically he's going to be a top 3 round guy. And if he has a good year and he can come back to Georgia because he has one more year after that, I see him coming back. If he has a good year, he'll come back one more time and play at Georgia. Because he could probably make more. You talked about the slotted salary. Probably make more at Georgia than you could in the NFL at that point if you have a good year. And then also, he just waited so long to play. I would think he would want to play more than one season. Is there a way? Do you see Gunnar Stockton in the draft next year, even if he's like a Will Howard or a Quinn Ewers or one of these late round guys?
Yeah, I just hope he makes enough to get a pickup truck. I mean, the poor guy's driving this old pickup truck around,
He's going to get him a Ford deal. I almost guarantee it.
Maybe he already has one. He's just cashing the check. And they keep driving. That shows how long these things last, how durable they are. Speaking of durability, that's the big thing with Gunnar. You think about the shot that he took against Texas, and it was heroic in a way. He held on to the ball. I don't know that he had a choice. I think, don't they have that reflex when they get concussed? I mean, the guy was pinning the ball to his chest with his eyes rolled back in his head. But how many hits like that can he take? And I'd say not many. And so, you wonder about Gunnar's durability as a starter if he's going to continue to run like that or be in a position where he has to. And that's where the passing game and the receivers and the offensive line and their ability to come together, all these other factors around the quarterback make a difference. Gunnar missed on some throws in the G-Day game. Now, I don't know how much of that was bad timing or just bad throw or bad moment or bad day. Maybe breakfast didn't go down easy on him or something. He made some really good throws, and he made some throws that Kirby Smart said weren't as good. And he made some good decisions, and Kirby Smart said he made some poor decisions. So, I listen to Kirby. Kirby's not trying to gas up Gunnar Stockton. He's not trying to motivate him. He doesn't need to play that game with Gunnar Stockton. Gunnar's going to give you everything he has every snap, every game. But to your point, the height, the secondary level throws, the layered throws, not the deep throws. He's got plenty of arm. He throws a really nice fade, a really good deep ball. And I think he's got touch on the short stuff as well. But can he make the tough two? Can he make that layered throw over the 6'3" linebacker that's in coverage, that just layers in right above him and sinks down into that next level on that 15-yard cross or that 20-yard out? Can he make that timing throw? Can he be a little quicker? Will his release be fast enough? These are microsecond things that make the difference. Now, I don't envision Gunnar turning into Doug Flutie or Drew Brees overnight, but do I think he can be productive enough in a Jake Fromm kind of way to hold a spot on a roster? Well, sure I do. He is a high intellect guy. He is a guy that you want with a clipboard. He is a guy that you want in the QB room. So when you draft that big quarterback who maybe didn't play in the pro style offense, and you got that goes to the meetings, with the quarterback's coach and goes to practices, well, who's he going to lunch with? He's going to lunch with a guy holding the clipboard. Who's he hanging out with? Who's going to be that guy? Jake has been that guy on teams before. Not to say Jake couldn't do it if he had the chance, but there is value that goes beyond the field for the backup quarterback, and Gunnar Stockton is that guy. He is a film rat. Jake told us that 2 years ago. Gunnar Stockton, not the other quarterbacks from 2 years ago, was spending more time in the film room than anybody else. The guy loves the game. He's pure football. He's no nonsense. He's no drama. He's good leadership. This is why Kirby wants a guy like Gunnar to win the job. You want to give this guy every opportunity because the intangibles are off the charts. But it goes back to your point, Cody. Can he make those throws? Will his height be too much of a detriment? Will we continue to see batted passes at the line of scrimmage? And will his decision-making be sound? Because if you're going to be the game manager kind of quarterback that Gunnar is, your decision-making has to be almost perfect. Your margin from error goes from this to this.
Very well said. And we're going to talk plenty more about the quarterback situation as we get on into the summer and into the fall as we get ready for this 2025 Georgia Bulldog season. All right. So we're going to go to the last segment of our show today, and we're going to do it with a costume change, right, Mike?
Yeah, I guess so.
You got a costume you can change with me?
Oh, my gosh. I do.
From our DawgNation Cruise, our Rain Spooner shirts. Appreciate this is a sponsor, right? Rain Spooner. Appreciate them being a part of it. Donating these Georgia Bulldog Hawaiian shirts. And Mike and I just came off the DawgNation Cruise. My first one. Mike's been on a few of them now. Mike, just your impressions of this year's cruise as we went to Nassau and Perfect Day Coco Cay on the Royal Caribbean's Utopia of the Seas.
You're kind of like Georgia football, right? When you think you can't get any better, right? It gets better. And the Utopia was massive. In fact, I think you told me you didn't even realize you were on a ship 99% of the time. You don't feel the water. It's just, oh gosh, I'm at a resort. Well, actually, no, you're in the middle of the ocean. Not exactly in the middle. The shoreline's close enough for those people a little fearful. And there's usually other ships around. It was fantastic. I mean, the events were amazing. Brandon Adams was in rare form. If you haven't seen the game show version of Brandon Adams, let me tell you, The guy ought to be in Hollywood right now with, you know, a remake of the $25,000 Pyramid or Let's Make a Deal. BA was on fire in front of the crowd. You know, Jeff was, you know, all the recruiting information he puts out. He puts out a lot on DawgNation.com. You get Jeff cornered, though, you know, one of them umbrella drinks, and he has all sorts of things. He was amazing. And of course, Kaylee entertained. Everyone loves Kaylee. You know, they watch her show on Thursday nights, and they see her often on DawgNation.com or doing her special coverage from the Combine. And you get an opportunity to meet her and spend some time with her and find out that, yes, she's just as entertaining and charming off the air as she is on the air. So it's a lot of fun to really get to know the personalities, and the cruisers have their own cast of characters. Yes. Believe me. I mean, these folks are very colorful people with a lot to say about Georgia football, and they don't mind arguing. I had a guy come to me and said, man, I really respect your opinion. I got to find out. What did you think about this? And I told him, he said, no, I disagree. You're wrong. You're right. Yeah. I said, wait a minute, what happened to respecting my opinion? Well, not till he disagreed with me. But it is so much fun. The dinners, the pool side, and then of course we have our programming where we do the Q&As and the trivia. And the cruise sells itself to the point that everybody that's been on, and I want to say we had like a 96% retention rate, like 170 to 178 from last year, and 2 people were sick, so they didn't come. So it's amazing the way these folks hang out with one another, with us outside the events at the Coco K Day, or like I said, at the poolside, or one of the, you know, many restaurants or bars that are on this cruise. So we're all still a little jacked up from the crew. We're all still excited. People are still talking about it. So yeah, Cody and I, we put on the silly shirts because we're still got a little bit of that cruise high going on, Cody. A little bit of that cruise high.
It was so much fun. This is my first time on the DawgNation Cruise, and I've heard Brandon talk about it forever. A few things that stuck out to me. When everybody started to arrive the first day, I'm a Georgia grad, so it just felt different, right? Like you're on this cruise and it's kind of awkward and you're in the middle of nowhere, and then everybody gets in the same room together and it's dog people and it's home and it's comfort. And that part of it was great. Talking so much ball. Everybody was talking ball. Talking to some ladies. I sat with Mike for 2 hours at breakfast, and we talked Georgia football. Or these folks just want to come, and the beauty is we have the time for that, right? Like we're sitting getting ready for a show, and somebody's asking me about Mike Bobo throwing screens, and that's great. You know, and like when you normally go on vacation, like I'll go Daytona Beach, we'll go somewhere, right? And you see somebody with a G on their shirt, and there's some kind of buzz inside you, and you talk to them real quickly. This is 4 days of that, and it's nonstop. And one of my favorite things, sitting, we're sitting at a bar on the ship, right? And so all of a sudden, this guy comes up. He goes, "What is the deal with all these Georgia people?" This guy had played wide receiver at Florida in the 80s, and he could not stand it that all these dogs were on here. And we were noticing, you know, it's a large ship. It carries a lot of people on there, but we had a large crew, and we were very visible all week. So it just felt like home.
Jack Leo made it said it best when, you know, we're sitting there doing our DawgNation Q&A session, and, you know, there's 130 people in the room, and we're answering Q&As, and you look out the window, and you see sailboats in Blue Bay and Nassau, Bahamas, and it's a port day. All these people could be on this island in paradise, right? Soaking it in the Bahamas, and they're sitting on the cruise ship for an hour and a half doing a Georgia Q&A, you know, between 10 and 11:30 in the morning, you know, prime time for, you know, grabbing your souvenirs or checking out the Bahamas. So that tells you about the sort of people that we have, and we love them. And that's the kind of people we have because we scheduled those events then. Because we're like, yeah, people are like, oh, did you go to the Bahamas? Did we go to the Bahamas? Were we even there? I mean, I'm in the room, man. I'm talking Georgia football. I'm jacked up. I'm ready to, you know, hear what the questions are because I want to hear some story ideas. What are people wondering about? What do people know? There's some coaches on this cruise. They coach some of these guys and know parents. And, oh, hey, did you know I knew this kid? And, you know, we coached her mother in women's basketball back. And you're like, wow. And you really get some insight because all these people are experts. They don't just follow Georgia football every now and then. They live this stuff, and they cannot wait to start barking like dogs or doing the, you know, what's that coming down the track so in the dining hall. Things get a little crazy for sure.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here. If you do want to know, so the DawgNation Cruise for next year, we already have the dates, and you can already sign up to be on it. So if you want to be a part of that, it's going to be April 20th to 24th next year on Utopia of the Seas again. Jessica Slater is our travel agent that Royal Caribbean provides for us. If you want to email her, you can. It's jslater@dreamvacations.com. jslater@dreamvacations.com. You can go ahead and get signed up for next year. I know a lot of folks who are on the cruise already went ahead and signed up because they had that much fun. So go ahead and do that for us. And you could be up there with us next year, and we'll talk NFL draft again, and we'll have plenty of dogs to talk about. It's been a big week, Mike. This has been a big show. It's great to be back with you, even though we look a little silly tonight. And we'll have a lot more Georgia Bulldog coverage coming up throughout this summer. We'll see you next Monday night right here on The Beat.